Good morning and welcome to the June 22nd, 2023 Law and Regulatory Committee meeting. I will now call the meeting to order and request the clerk to call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bernasconi?
Here.
Councilmember Mendonça?
Here. At this time, I'd like to ask Mark Lewinsky to lead us in the pledge.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mark. At this time, I'll open it up for public comment. As a reminder, this public comment is for items not listed on today's agenda. And is there anyone in the audience that wishes to make a comment at this time? Seeing none, I will close public comment. We'll move on to item 5.1 in today's agenda, which is the minutes from the prior meeting, of May 25th. Vice Mayor Bernasconi, do you have any corrections or revisions to the minutes?
No, I do not. I'd like to move that we approve the minutes.
And I will second that. I will open up for public comment. Seeing none, I will close public comment. And
So we have consensus to approve the minutes.
thank you. At this time, we'll move on to item 6.1 on today's agenda, which is our state and federal priority legislation for June of 2023. And I will turn it over to Mark.
Good morning, Chairman Mendonça and Vice Mayor Bernasconi. Once again, I'm Mark Lewinsky, Government Relations Administrator. And the following report includes an overview of several bills and areas of particular focus on public safety, homelessness, and at the federal level, the debt ceiling limit discussions. And I'll be providing the entire presentation today as Rob Becerra has a conflict today and isn't available to provide the public safety update. With the June 2nd milestone for all bills to be out of their house of origin, all bills that presented today have met this requirement and have moved to the other house for committee hearings and floor votes as defined by the legislative calendar. With respect to public safety.
Mark, I hate to interrupt you. I don't know if this is the right PowerPoint.
Yeah, this is,
This says this is about the redistricting measure, the business alliance. Okay.
No, so John, it'll be the legislative priorities for June is the title of the presentation.
this is where we need some of that music to kind of
Elevator music.
Please stand by.
Can I go back and help?
Yeah, of course.
I'm glad you look at your phone so that I noted, I can't see from back there.
I was going down and all of a sudden we put a notepad out there because people run out of speaker note cards. So, yeah, I started doing that, keeping it there. Sometimes Dom will ask me a question. And I got my Apple Watch buzzing me.
Okay, thank you. So with respect to public safety, these bills, public safety bills have been presented to the committee previously. With respect to AB 793, this bill provides that existing law requires a state corporation that provides electronic communication services or remote computing services to the general public to comply with a warrant issued by another state to produce specified records. The city has a watch position on this bill. However, we can report that working in coordination with Cal Chiefs, commitments have been secured to narrow the scope of the bill to address some of law enforcement's concerns. Staff will continue to work towards additional amendments while the bill is in the Senate to address the remaining items of concern. With respect to AB 1034, this bill prohibits a law enforcement agency or a law enforcement officer from installing, activating, or using any biometric surveillance system in connection with an officer camera or data collected by an officer's camera. The city currently has a watch position on this bill to determine the impacts it may have if enacted. It's important to note that Roseville PD does not use facial recognition, so we are monitoring the bill to guard against any amendments that would be of concern to the city. And then Assembly Bill 33. This bill would establish, subject to appropriation by the legislature, the Fentanyl Addiction and Overdose Prevention Task Force to undertake various duties related to fentanyl abuse. The city initially had a watch position on this bill and has moved it to a support position after reviewing the bill in greater detail. The bill would establish a task force responsible for collecting and organizing data on fentanyl abuse in California, evaluating strategies to increase public awareness in addressing the growing fentanyl epidemic. The city supports the bill and its forward approach in combating an ever-growing and deadly challenge. It's important to note that amendment was taken on this bill that the bill is now an urgency measure, which means that it is required to be approved by a two-thirds vote. But if it does meet that requirement and the governor signs the bill will go into effect immediately. With respect to homelessness, all the four bills, the following four bills have implications for addressing homelessness. Senate Bill 43. After further review and consideration, the city has moved to a support position on this bill for the impacts it would have for those in the community faced with mental health issues. Senate Bill 43 would modernize the definition of gravely disabled within the Latterman-Petrus Short Act to provide conditions that result in a substantial risk of serious harm to an individual's physical or mental health. This includes the inability to seek medical care, adequate shelter, or self-protection, and includes the inability to seek, or safety, Updating this definition would be more in alignment with the current realities present in our communities and should ensure that individuals at risk of significant harm receive the help they need. With respect to Senate Bill 363, the city has taken a support position on this bill as it would establish a real-time behavioral health bed database for the state. The measure would require the State Department of Health Care Services to develop a database by 2025 to collect, aggregate, and display information about beds in inpatient psychiatric facilities, crisis stabilization units, community care facilities, and licensed residential alcoholism or drug abuse recovery or treatment facilities. This information would help provide timely access to care and increase coordination between service settings. And we know that mental illness and substance abuse, like many other health conditions, when treated early and with appropriate supports and services, are less disabling and result in fewer adverse outcomes. SB 363 would provide easily accessible bed availability data that would connect individuals to care more quickly and help cut down on extended emergency room stays. With respect to AB 1657, the Affordable Housing Bond Act, this bill would enact the Affordable Housing Bond Act of 2024, which, if adopted, would authorize the issuance of bonds in a specified amount pursuant to the state general obligation bond law. We know that without some form of additional subsidy, either through general obligation bonds, a general fund appropriation, or more state low-income housing tax credits, only a limited number of affordable housing projects will have enough subsidy to move forward beyond 2023, given the existed limited resources of state and federal low-income housing tax credits. It's important to note that any support or opposition positions on statewide bonds need to be brought to the full council to determine a support or opposed position per the city council's direction and its legislative platform. It's another reason why we currently have a watch position on this bill. And then with respect to AB 799, the city has taken a support position on this bill, which would establish a strong accountability and results framework. The AB 799 would require the California Interagency Council on Homelessness to set statewide metrics that are ambitious and achievable to incorporate into its action plan. It further requires the council to establish a financing plan for solving homelessness, as well as to establish a unified funding application to simplify and consolidate the application process for the multiple programs now administered through multiple state departments. The bill would further require big cities, counties, and continuums of care to collaborate on a regional homelessness action plan, a comprehensive plan to prevent and end homelessness every 5 years. With respect to at the federal level, with the recent enactment of the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2023, the Senate and House Appropriations Committees have begun the markups of their respective appropriations bills. It's important to note that the House Appropriations Chair has announced that the House Appropriation Committee markups will be at approximately $119 billion less than the spending caps the recent debt limit deal set, and about $130 billion less than current government funding. With the Appropriations Committee work beginning, it's likely that the committee will release their list of approved fiscal year 24 earmark requests, now known as community project funding and congressional directed spending request, submitted by members of Congress at the time the full committee markups are held. This is important for the 4 city projects that were included in requests submitted by the city's members of Congress. In addition to the 2 Environmental Utility Department projects that were previously reported to the committee, Representative Kiley included the Blue Oaks Widening Project in his community project funding request, and Senator Padilla included the Roseville Adventure Club Broadband Project in his congressionally directed spending request. The Blue Oaks Widening Project is a $3.2 million project for the Blue Oaks roadway and bridge widening project, which would alleviate a critical traffic pinch point, allow faster access between local highways and the interstate. And the Roseville Adventure Broadband Project is a $2 million request to provide internet service and related technology to Roseville's adventure clubs. Staff is monitoring the markups closely with the federal lobbyist team to understand if the funding for any of the projects continues to be a possibility. And with that, this concludes my presentations, and I'm prepared to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mark. Vice Mayor?
I don't have any questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
I had one question on the SB 43. So does that expand our staff or our officers' ability on the 5150 holds and how we transport those to local hospitals and agencies, or is that more on the field work level?
So I would suspect that because the bill lays out a whole list of protocols and different processes that would be enacted, and so I would expect that it would have implications for our officers on those types of calls. I didn't see anything called out specifically denoting 5150s, but once again, the bill is very heavy in defining processes and further elaborating on health practitioners and the types of activities that they can be involved in. And so
Okay.
I suspect that it would.
Okay, cool. And then I know it wasn't on today's presentation, but just thought I would ask, do we have any update on the bill concerning the use of the canines?
It has not moved forward.
Okay.
We don't know at this point if the author is going to bring it back as a 2-year bill, but the bill has stalled at this point. It's not moving forward this session.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Okay, at this time, we will open it up for public comment. Seeing none, we will close public comment, and we will move on to item 6.2 on today's agenda, Electric Department Priority Legislation. Good morning, Amber.
Good morning, Chairman Danza, Vice Mayor Bernasconi. Today, I'm going to give an overview of some of the bills that we're continuing to watch as part of this legislative session. And I'm going to start with, we're going to discuss the cap and trade program evaluation, a bill on that, a bill related to central procurement and planning reserve margins, legislation related to the Advanced Clean Fleets Rule, a bill on bidirectional charging, and then a final bill on renewable hydrogen and how that would apply to the RPS. So starting with AB 9, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because it was just sent to the Assembly and active file, but I did want to note that CARB is going, the California Air Resources Board, CARB, is going to be opening a regulatory process later this year to update the cap and trade program. So that was one of the reasons why we had an opposed position on this bill, is because we felt that it was unnecessary to have legislation while a regulatory process was already going to be underway. The following bill, AB 1373, this is by Assembly Member Garcia. We have an oppose unless amended position on this bill. And what this bill would do is it would allow the Department of Water Resources to undertake procurement of offshore wind and geothermal energy while acting as sort of a central procurement energy agency for the procurement of these resources. Publicly owned utilities could participate in this process if they wanted to, but they're not required to participate. Where the bill does impact publicly owned utilities, including Roseville, is if we fail to meet our minimum planning reserve margins. And under this process, under the bill, the CEC would determine if we did not meet our minimum planning reserve margin. And if so, they would assess a capacity payment on us. That would be based on the amount that we were deficient in capacity procurement, and then the cost of resources kind of through the pool for the DWR resources. So we are currently trying to get amendments to this bill that would strike a reference to the California Public Utilities Commission standard that should not apply to publicly owned utilities. And we're also trying to get amendments that would have these capacity payments only apply to utilities that are leaning on the Strategic Reliability Reserve Program through the California Independent System Operator. So that would not be Roseville because we operate in the Balancing Authority of Northern California, not the ISO. We did just receive word that we expect a proposal similar to this to come out from the governor over this weekend, and it could be passed as early as Tuesday. So I think that that process will probably run parallel to this bill, but it's something that we're really watching closely as part of the budget trailer bill process in regards to kind of these capacity payment penalties that I just discussed. So we'll let the committee know more as we know more as this process unfolds. The next bill, AB 1594, is also by Assemblymember Garcia, and this is our trade association-sponsored bill that would address ongoing concerns with the Advanced Clean Fleets Rule that came out of the California Air Resources Board earlier this year. And this is the regulation that would require us to purchase 100% zero-emission vehicles by beginning in 2027. And AB 1594, we are supportive of this bill because it proposes that public agencies would be able to request their own determination for whether a comparable ZEV is available for purchase without regard to the model year of the vehicle being replaced and in consideration of daily usage capabilities and foreseeable emergency response and mutual aid needs. Our city strongly supports this bill as a way to enable our fleets to continue to maintain reliable service and respond to major events. The next bill, SB 233 by Senator Skinner, requires new electric vehicles to be capable of bidirectional charging starting in 2030. When I think of bidirectional charging, it's really when your vehicle can take power from the grid, but then the grid can also use your vehicle to send power back to the house or to the grid. So that's kind of the bidirectional charging nature that we're talking about. And this bill would require the CEC to examine challenges and opportunities of bidirectional charging. And then it would also have CARB clarify which vehicles must be bidirectional by the end of 2026. CARB may also exempt certain type of vehicles from being bidirectional capable. So right now we are watching this bill, but we are also in the process of better understanding how bidirectionality will affect our system. And we're actually going to be meeting internally in the department to discuss this a little bit later today. And then finally, the last bill, SB 663 by Archuleta, and this is related to the California Renewable Portfolio Standard Program, or the RPS. And it would expand the RPS program to include renewable hydrogen. And it defines renewable hydrogen as being produced using eligible renewable energy resources that are new and incremental resources. We're generally supportive of expanding the eligibility of resources that can apply for the RPS program. It gives more flexibility. So we'll continue to monitor these hydrogen opportunities going forward and as the technology further comes up to scale. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Amber. Vice Mayor Bernasconi?
No questions, lots going on, but no questions.
On the AB 1594 zero emissions bill, so in theory, if we held on to some of our fleet vehicles longer, to get a little more use out of them, to delay having to purchase these newer ones, is there like a timeline that we know if we push it out, say 1 to 2 extra years, does that buy us year for year, or are we still pushing up against that deadline?
Yeah, so CARB has this 13-year model rule, and that's one of the concerns that we have because generally we replace our vehicles on a 10-year time frame. We just generally, and that's safety, make sure that they can do the capabilities. So it's kind of a convoluted part of the rule that basically says if you keep them for 13 years, then there's different exemptions that can apply there. But I think for us, like I said, that's concerning because that's not generally how we operate our vehicles currently. And so we'd like to just have more flexibility, especially because a lot of our vehicles are operating in, for mutual aid purposes in inclement terrain, bad weather, where there is no power, for example. So we're really seeking to kind of have more of a role in that determination, and that's what this bill is trying to do for us.
Got it. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, at this time, I'll open it up for public comment. Seeing none, I will close public comment. Amber, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will move on to the next item in this morning's agenda, which is 6.3, the Environmental Utilities Priority Legislation Update. And good morning, Noelle.
Good morning, Chair Mendonza and Vice Mayor Bernasconi. As you've heard, we've hit the halfway mark in the legislative year. So this morning I plan to provide updates on bills that we've actually shared with the committee previously, but not bills that I actually covered last month. The bill topics this morning that I'll be covering are proposed new mandates on local government, water rights, and statewide water supply planning. And I will conclude my presentation by highlighting several tours that we have provided to state and federal policymakers. So the first bill I would like to cover this morning is AB 249, which would mandate local water agencies like Roseville to test each outlet that provides potable water to every Title I school within our jurisdiction. In doing a quick search, we have about 9 Title I schools within our jurisdiction. And if you think about it, there's probably 50 to 100 potable water outlets at each site. So that's a lot of testing to do. Providing clean and safe drinking water to our customers is the cornerstone of the water industry. And as an industry, we're seeking to put a pause on this bill until after the adoption of the improvements to the federal lead and copper rule. That way we can determine if there are any gaps or modifications needed to meet California's needs. Since we last reviewed, been a number of amendments that have actually scaled it back. Previously, it applied to all schools, so narrowing it to the Title I schools is a good and beneficial move for the bill. They've also narrowed the bill by removing schools built or remodeled after 2010. And they have also increased the funding for implementation. However, just looking at the scale of the testing and replacement needs, the funding is still woefully inadequate. Even with those changes, staff does remain concerned for several reasons. One, water agencies are already required to meet well-established clean drinking water standards that include reporting and action levels if we find lead in our water. So this measure is really placing additional costs and staffing burdens on water agencies when the bill's intent is to require schools to replace old outlets that may be leaching lead into the water that they serve. Again, the federal government is updating the lead and copper rule, so we feel this bill is premature. And then finally, we remain concerned that there may be Proposition 218 implications. The next measure is AB 755. This measure would require Roseville and other water agencies to conduct a cost of service analysis at a household level to determine the incremental cost of serving water to a single-family resident major user. As part of this cost of service study, water agencies would have to set arbitrary conservation goals for residential customers in order to come up with a hypothetical cost savings for the utility had the major users met that hypothetical goal. As you can tell, hypotheticals and arbitrary things do not go well when doing studies and setting rates. Additionally, water agencies would need to make this information available on our website. This measure seems to be a solution in search of a problem. Water agencies are already being mandated to meet conservation goals, but those are based on the utility level, not at the household level. This bill approach seems to be better fit for agencies that base their rates on a water budget, where they set a budget for each household. Another concern is that this does not take into account other classes of water users and their impact. And then finally, conducting analysis based on hypotheticals may open the utility up to unknown liability. Finally, it will also add additional costs to expand the scope of our current studies when we're setting our rates. The next measure is AB 676 by Assemblymember Bennett, which I'm happy to report that as of last Friday, we are now neutral on this bill. Through our industry coalition, we were able to get troubling language removed from the bill that would have applied the public trust doctrine to pre-1914 water rights. This measure now more specifically defines what domestic use is. It is water use for human consumption, cooking or sanitary use, care of household livestock and animals, care of household gardens, and the delivery of water for those purposes by public, municipal, private, and industrial water agencies. This measure is actually due to be heard next month in the Senate Natural Resources Committee, where we have an understanding that they may be adding fire suppression and other safety purposes to this definition. The next three bills that I'll be covering this morning are aimed at statewide water supply planning. The first bill is AB 30, and this would require the Department of Water Resources to integrate forecast-informed reservoir operations, more commonly known as FIRO, and hazard resilience into their current atmospheric rivers research program. The goal of this recast program would be to increase water supply, hydropower availability, and improve water supply reliability. The water industry really supports this effort to use the best available science and technologies to adaptively manage the state's water systems and better coordinate with federal agencies as they co-manage our resources. The next measure is SB 366, which is sponsored by the California Municipal Utilities Association, of which we are members of, along with Roseville Electric. This bill focuses on the state's water portfolio and growing it by requiring the Department of Water Resources, as part of their California Water Plan update in 2028, to develop and set a target for new water resources to meet future needs in 2050. The bill would set an interim planning target of 10 million acre-feet of new water to be developed by 2040. And it also requires them to conduct an economic analysis that looks at the cost and impacts of the state should it not have enough water supplies to meet demands over the next 10, 20, and 30-year planning horizon. The state has focused for the past decade or more on conservation just due to the climatic scenarios that we've been experiencing. This is concerning because urban use of water accounts for just 10% of all water usage. So the water industry is really supporting this measure as it provides for a more holistic approach by adding the creation of new water supplies to complement all of our conservation efforts that we are already doing. The final measure this morning is SB 659, which is sponsored by the Sacramento Regional Water Authority. This bill focuses on groundwater and would require the Department of Water Resources to develop and adopt a groundwater recharge action plan by January 1st of 2026. This action plan would then be folded into the 2028 update of the California Water Plan that we just talked about in the prior bill. The plan is to identify and include immediate opportunities and long-term solutions to increase the state's groundwater supply. So again, similar to the prior bill. Roseville is obviously very supportive of this effort as it dovetails nicely with the region's development of a groundwater bank and Roseville's ASR program. And just a quick shout out to the ASR team. Roseville has injected approximately 1,900 acre-feet of water this year so far, which would serve approximately 6,000 homes for a year in a drought scenario. We have stopped at the moment just due to the melting conditions of the snowpack. But if the federal government makes that water available, we will begin injecting again. And then finally, as part of our legislative and regulatory efforts, we are actively engaging with policymakers to share the impact of policy proposals on our programs and projects. One way we do this is providing them a tour of our facilities so they can see firsthand how policies may affect us or how funding would be used. At the federal level, EU has submitted 2 community project requests, as we've talked about before, and those are for the Barton Road Water Treatment Plant, solar array and battery energy storage system, and the PCWA Raw Water Conveyance Project. Additionally, we are supporting the Regional Water Authority's efforts for a federally recognized water bank. So with those projects in mind, we were able to host the district staff from U.S. Senators Feinstein and Padilla's offices to tour our facilities in support of those specific projects. We did have a tour scheduled for Representative Kiley. However, he was called back to D.C. for the debt ceiling vote. So we're working on getting him out here to do that tour to our facilities as well. And then at the state level, we had a request by Senator Sayarto, who's actually from Southern California, to tour our Pleasant Grove wastewater treatment plant, to see our upgrades and the new ERP program or project. While the senator isn't from this area, he does sit on committees where legislation affecting projects like that are going to be heard. And so it was just an amazing opportunity to share the projects with him and then some of the hurdles that we may face. And with that, that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Noel. Vice Mayor Bernasconi?
Thanks for the information. Just a quick question for you, Noel, on SB, hold on. Oh, AB 249, regarding the lead testing.
Yes.
Schools now have to submit to lead testing, or is that just voluntary?
So there has been prior legislation, and they were voluntarily, water agencies had to make available testing within their school sites. We worked with each school site to develop a testing plan. We did not test every single outlet at a school site, so a lot of this information is already known by those schools if they availed themselves of that testing.
Okay, so it was more on a voluntary basis, 'cause I remember a few years back
Yes.
that happened. So this will just mandate it and make it law.
Yes, and then instead of up to 5, it would be every single potable water outlet at that site.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Wow. There's a lot of timelines and goals in that report. I don't have any questions, but it was good. I appreciate the update on the local and the federal level legislators that we were able to host and to get that sort of recognition for our city. So that's always good. All right, this time I'll open it up for public comment. Seeing none, I will close public comment, and I'll bring it back around to Mark if he has any final comments.
Just for the next meeting in July, the legislature will be on recess, so there won't be a L&R committee meeting in July. The next scheduled L&R committee meeting will then be on Thursday, August 24th at 9 o'clock.
Wonderful. All right, well, that brings us to the end of today's meeting. Appreciate everybody joining us, and we will adjourn until August 24th. Thank you very much.